Okay, careful. Greetings and welcome. This is Lansing Online News Radio. We're at WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. My name is Bonnie Buckaroo. And tonight we're going to be focusing a lot on politics in the local area. As many of you know, that we're looking forward to next Saturday. We're going to be joining the Occupy Wall Street movement with Occupy Lansing. Some of you who follow us at Lansing Online News have seen me holding up my Occupy Mason sign out there at the courthouse in Ingham County.
Was that you out there in Mason?
Yes, it was.
I thought it might be. I saw the photo.
My students thought that it was a Heil Hitler salute, and I assured them no, it was not. I was just waving at the camera. And I have good news, Bill, because I think I can get a neighbor to go with me next week, and we may be the only place in the country that will double our participation in one week.
That's funny. You never know. In Mason, you might get a half dozen.
Yeah, so it's going to be a fun show tonight. We're joined by Norm Pollack, who is a former political science professor at Michigan State University, talking about the Obama administration. Then we're going to be joined by Kevin Pedrick and David Mitchell from the North Star Center. They're one of the groups helping to sort of organize the leaderless group downtown on Saturday. So it's kind of hard to say that they're organizers when they're very strongly a leaderless organization. But Bill, I wanted to ask you first, one of the things that was going on in the local community that you were involved in was the silent auction.
Right. We had a silent auction for the Lansing Historical Society this last Saturday downtown in the former Bank of Lansing, which most people remember it as it's now Comerica. And there were tours of the bank. We had 125 items. The vast majority of them sold. We raised $9,000.
That's great for a first time.
That's great for a first time. Everyone was very pleased. We had a lot of fun. The food was great. We're going to use that money to put in place an effort to open a museum for the city of Lansing. Lansing is probably the only capital city in the United States that does not have a city museum.
Is that right? Yeah. And what kinds of are there items already cluttering somebody's garage?
No, not really, because the Historical Society has been unable to accept large items, 3D items, because there's no place to store them.
I see.
You have to treat people's gifts very carefully, and
sure.
We have not been able to do that. And one of the first things we'll probably look at is safe storage space.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. So will they repeat the event next year?
Yes, absolutely. Now, yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it was easy. It was just fun. I mean, it wasn't easy, but it was fun. Everybody had a great time, and it's fun to watch the sharks come around the items when they get ready to close. To raise the bid. I arranged to have a lot of books donated, and I donated quite a few categories and things. They sold very well. I was surprised.
Oh, that's good.
I mean, very, very well. Like a Jim Harrison signed book and things like that.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, I wish I had known. I'd been down there for that one. Wow.
It went very high, so that was good.
Well, you have another event coming up shortly, and that's the Arc of Justice. It's the notable book for this year. Can you tell us a little bit about the book and what the activities are?
Sure. It's called The Great Michigan Read. It's sponsored by the Michigan Humanities Council. There are more than 200 participating agencies across the state. What the book is The Arc of Justice by Kevin Boyle, a former Detroiter. He won the National Book Award in 2004 for this. It is a creative fiction, and I mean creative, that it's a good read rather than just a recitation of facts, about the 1925 murder in Detroit of a white man by a black man, Ocean Sweet. It's Ossian, but it's pronounced Ocean Sweet. Defended his house against a mob, and he felt obviously very threatened. Shots were fired into the mob. One man was killed. There was a hung jury in the first trial. The second jury, Clarence Darrow came in.
Oh, interesting.
For the second trial. And Clarence Darrow had already done the Scopes Monkey trial and several other major trials, so he was very famous. And Kevin Boyle told me he thought just one of the things that made Darrow successful, other than he was a good attorney, was he just liked to poke sharp sticks at people. And he said if he got him in their eye, better yet. He was an obstinate man, very dynamic. He I mean, it's pretty easy to check Wikipedia. So he got Ocean Suite and his family and friends off. But both Ocean Suite led a very terrible life after that. And I think one of the points that's made in the book that not a lot of people talk about is the what happens when there's violent action.
The scars that are left.
The scars that are left. The family that was left without a father, and then Ocean Suite basically had a very terrible life after that. And I'd let people read about that. But I think that's in the book, and it's nothing really good comes of violence.
That's somewhat out of character, isn't it, for the notable books? I mean, this is a very heavy,
absolutely.
serious book.
I don't think any state, or I know Michigan has never done this. This is a weighty book. I mean, when you start talking about race in a state like Michigan, it's weighty right off the bat. But there's been amazing response to it. They've given away 4,000 books.
Wonderful.
To nonprofit organizations. Kevin Boyle's going to be at 6 locations in Michigan, including Lansing, which I'll talk about in a minute. They've got a touring exhibit. There's all kinds of supported activities in the 6 cities he'll be at. I'd really recommend people go see him. In Lansing, he is going to be at the Cooley Law School. He's going to be there October 25th at 7 p.m. But before that, on October 20th, a professor from Grand Valley State University, Matthew Daly, is going to make a presentation on the cartography of race, which is basically about segregation, and segregation that continues today, frankly.
Certainly. Detroit and Macomb County remain the 2 most segregated counties in the country.
And I mean, we can still see that in the Lansing area pretty easily, on how race is segregated.
Speaking of that, David Voda of the Capital Area District Library was posted in his Lost Lansing column on Lansing Online News a piece on redlining in Lansing that really is a remarkable history of what happened in the city. He has some of the original documents that he has included with the story, and it's startling to look at the way in which, you were not allowed to have Ethiopians in some of the properties here, all the exclusions that were actually put in on the deeds.
Mine's our original deed to our house built in this will tell you how commonplace it was. Our house was built by the editor of the Lansing State Journal.
Oh, really?
We're only the second owners. Our deed, which they left behind, says no Negroes, no Jews.
Oh, God.
And that's our house.
That's stunning.
And that's 1 generation ago.
What year was that deed executed?
1929.
1929.
And it was the Lansing State Journal's editor. So, I mean, it was even common for someone who should maybe start thinking about issues like that. No.
Contested? No, it was just so common. Those were all put in there. That's going to be interesting. We've also had one other thing that's been going on in the local community that, well, not so local, but it was over there in Grand Rapids. Bill and I have been enjoying watching.
I'm not laughing.
Oh, aren't you?
No.
Of course you
are. Oh, we got video.
We do. We're webcasting here. If you go to LansingOnlineNews.com, you can watch the live webcast. The Art Prize was awarded over there in Grand Rapids. Bill, it was a thrilling competition, wasn't it? I was particularly fond of the 5th place winner. It's a metal sculpture of a dog named Rusty and his ball. Boy, that's just right up there with Picasso. The winner was a glass mosaic?
It's a stained glass mosaic, right. That's how they describe it.
And it
is very
of
large.
The crucifixion.
Crucifixion, yes.
And it is about as schlocky with the nice rolling clouds. And, I mean, next year I figure they'll get the guy that does the kids with the big eyes.
Elvis.
Or Velvet Elvis.
Or we've already started talking about doing a Lego Blessed Virgin Mary.
That would be, definitely a surefire winner.
It could win.
Some of us who shall remain nameless got into a lot of hot water last year for complaining about the fact that what we should really be doing is taxing these rich guys so that we actually get our hands on their money and put them into the public schools and have a real art program. So we might raise a generation of people with taste. That might be nice, instead of letting this little dilettante run around with his millions and hold an art show for 2 weeks in Grand Rapids of, shall we say, questionable taste.
Right, and I think the other thing that happened because of this, it's a popular vote. It's done online, I believe, and they have posts throughout. I've been there. I think one of the things, there's been a lot of backlash in the Grand Rapids area about this winner.
Yeah.
So maybe this should be looked at a little differently. Maybe you have a people's prize and maybe a juried prize.
Yeah, that would make much better sense.
Yeah.
Although again, I really don't know why it is that we allow rich families to let their dilettante art history kids somehow dominate the community for a couple of weeks rather than just simply tax away their funds for nice publicly supported art that might be a little bit better overall.
Yeah, I think the reason that they allow it is because it brings a lot of tourism dollars into the city. You cannot move over there during this period of time.
I'll bet.
The traffic is it's incomprehensible. I've never seen Grand Rapids with that many people in it before.
Well, my job as curmudgeon in chief really is important though to maintain my credibility for being crabby about all things that other people seem to like. In that regard, I noticed that I posted last night on Facebook. I noticed that Norm Pollock, our first guest, is joining us. Norm was a political science professor
Hi,
at Michigan
Bonnie.
State
Hi, Bill.
University.
Howdy.
Actually, not political science. It was a different department.
What department was
It
it?
doesn't matter because after 29 years as a full professor, I'm not talking to anybody, and it has a lot to do with sort of being on the left at times, and so I think of myself more as a sanitation engineer.
cleaning up the society.
Right. Or, yeah.
I announced that Norm would be here to discuss the Obama administration and really begin giving us a bit of a critique from the progressive point of view, from the left, because we certainly see enough of the critique from the right. But there's a very valid critique to be made from the left. And I was thinking, Norm, you were maybe early in recognizing that the person that many people thought they were voting for, a progressive, wasn't really what we were voting for.
Bonnie, this would take me into so many things, but let me preface it by saying that perhaps the most controversial thing about coming to terms with Obama is the question of race. Okay, and what this means for me is that from the time I was, at least 17, was very much involved in civil rights and in the South. And then this extended to Mississippi in '64, to a very harrowing time in Selma before the Grand March when Jim Reeb was murdered in the streets of Selma, and I took an interracial car down and immediately got involved in demonstrations in Montgomery. And so it goes all the way along. The point being that I'm not impressed with this guy, and I'm not impressed with this guy precisely because he is black. And I say that because I think that he has done a disservice to the black community, and as the first black president could have done so much more for the entire society. So when I go back and I compare him with people I've had the privilege of shaking hands with W.E.B. Du Bois. I've followed Paul Robeson. I know these guys from standing with them, James Foreman of SNCC, Bob Moses heading the Mississippi Project, and so on. And these were real men that I admire and are so completely full of integrity. And I saw in Obama from the start that there was something wrong. Okay, that was even campaign time, although I was thrilled with the I guess one of the big speeches.
Yeah.
Nancy and I contributed money, we voted for him, and so on. Day one, everything came already to a crashing close with the notion that Geithner and Larry Summers would be holding key positions in the administration. That might not sound like much. It may sound sort of technical, but it is Summers, for example, who really pushed hard for deregulation in the Clinton administration and was largely responsible for the destruction of Glass-Steagall. And it is Geithner, who was president of the New York Federal Reserve Bank, who really provided a protective shield for the entire banking community. So I expected nothing from these guys.
They were part of the Robert Rubin.
They were very much part of the Robert Rubin
cabal, if you will.
Right, and it's amazing when you look at White House personnel to this day, like Bill Daley, the chief of staff now. These guys are drawn from Wall Street. It's almost like it's a finishing school for Goldman Sachs. They'll come in, they'll do their part, they'll go back to the corporate world, and so on. There's such a closeness that is very hard to explain, but if we ever get into it, I think I might be able to explain it. But that was the start of things. And then when it became clear that on key issues, so many different areas, but all have to be interconnected. This is at least my way of analyzing things. So when I looked at civil liberties, for example, and I saw right away the denial of habeas corpus to detainees,
Yes.
and then the continuation of the rendition program,
Which
and then the
continues
wireless wiretaps, and you can go on and on. Now, within the last few weeks, the use of the Espionage Act against a whistleblower from the National Security Agency who was merely trying to show how sloppy their work was. But Obama has used the Espionage Act more than any other president directed to civilians, I think, perhaps in the history of the country. It's this kind of stuff where you see the Department of Justice, on one hand, refusing to prosecute people who really have been guilty of crimes in the economic world, and something came out, I think this was in Ron Susskind's book, I'm almost sure, that Obama in secret, gave assurances to the Bush administration that first April that there would be absolutely no prosecutions for war crimes of anyone in that administration. So civil liberties alone was, to me, a dismal failure.
You're listening to WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. Have to do those every 15 minutes, or the FCC comes in under the Obama administration and frog marches us out and puts us against the wall.
I don't mean to I wish you guys, both you and Bill, I wish you would butt in because I don't.
Well, I'm going to butt in because one of the things I'm currently reading the Ron Suskind book, and one of the points that he does make is that it was a sort of old boys club there with the old Clinton administration economic team brought back to the White House. And keep in mind, they were the ones that drove Brooks Lee Bourne out of reforming the CDOs.
Right.
And, the credit default swaps were part of the problem.
Right.
But it was this idea also that, both at the political and the economic and at the cultural level, you have to admit that even from the inauguration, there were big red flags that went up. Rick Warren gives the invocation, and you wonder why the sort of nod to the Tea Party right, which was just getting formed at that time. It's a very strange phenomenon that we see immediately. The person we thought, many people thought they were voting for, was not the person we got.
And what he did on that economic front, the name that keeps coming up, the person I very much admire and wish to see enter Democratic primaries against Obama is Elizabeth Warren.
Absolutely.
And Elizabeth Warren, as everyone knows, created the basis for the Consumer Protection Agency, and then Obama appropriating her name, letting her give some radiance to the administration, promptly marginalized her and marginalized Paul Volcker, the two people who were key to really getting at this entire financial crisis and the mess. So he's very skillful at that, of this marginalizing good people. And
the Suskind book opens with a white scene in the Rose Garden as he is announcing the new Consumer Protection Division with Elizabeth Warren next to him, but is not giving her the nod in order to become the head of, because he's not willing to fight for her. Right. And he already has others that he plans to put in that position. It's just frightening that, the people who literally were so enthusiastic, they put their whole careers on the line for him, ended up being marginalized all the time.
When you were talking about some phrase came up, give peace a chance. We're in the 10th year of the Afghan war.
Yes.
That would have been the easiest call.
Well, he did run. That's one thing he did run on, though. He said, let's get out of Iraq because we're going to focus on Afghanistan. Well, we've done neither really, neither one.
Well, just a very small asterisk or footnote to a lot of this concerning the surge in Afghanistan, which is entirely his doing.
Yes.
But for those who yearn for Hillary, it should be noted that she called for an even larger surge and was right in there with the military even more than he was. So what I'm trying to say, I guess, to anybody out there is that the Democratic Party has to stand up to judgment just as the Republican Party does, and that when you look at this whole range of policies, And the one question still to just keep hammering away at is, what about job creation? Why no job creation? And I think I have at least some understanding of why this is the case, but the record itself is really abysmal. And when you see Obama saying pridefully, we're going to run $1 billion campaign this time, while people are starving, while people are foreclosed, while the whole country is really hurting, and when he goes off at a $25,000 a week estate for his vacation, again while this is happening, this is someone who really, it's not that he has a tin ear, it's that he is just ice cold. And I cannot believe that he has any feeling for humanity. I know that sounds almost impossible, but
he's a technocrat, isn't he? Almost the perfect technocrat?
That's what I don't feel, Bonnie, for this reason. I feel that a technocrat ordinarily is sort of, he's sort of neutral, working through the mechanics of things and so on. I feel that Obama is ideologically driven. And he's ideologically driven in the sense of a very real commitment to what we call market fundamentalism or free market ideology. And the key to this, and one reason you do not have job creation, is that he is a very strong proponent of deregulation.
Yeah.
And when you think of deregulation and job creation, they don't go together, because if you don't regulate, you give the corporations the opportunity to do anything they want with their labor force, with everything that comes their way. And deregulation can be seen in practically every agency in the government right now under Obama, especially the Department of Energy, where the environmental issues are right up there in front, and so on. So it's.
I see him as a corporatist. I see him as being very much in sync with the Bill Clinton triangulation. Use that to try to distract people as the corporate agenda gets ramrodded through.
What are we going to do when people get caught up, say, in the folksiness of Clinton and things like that, and forget about public policy, forget what they're doing, don't look at who they're working for and associating with, and it's just terrible. And it's almost a way of saying that we have such a profound absence of political consciousness and understanding and willingness to scrutinize, that these guys are getting away really with murder.
The other thing that we talked a little bit about earlier today was his stance on medical marijuana, and he was going to leave it alone, basically. And he's done just the opposite. He's going after him with a vengeance now.
I know. He's going after the dispensaries in California, and you have to wonder why it is that we're involved in this full-scale drug war with the violence escalating with Mexico. It doesn't make any sense. I guess getting back to some of the economic issues as well, Norm, what baffles me is that we're now seeing what may well be a major meltdown occurring in Europe. It doesn't seem as though they're going to be able to stave off the kind of chaos that the TARP funds may or may not have at least delayed here. And the reality is that, I mean, I don't see that we have any regulations in place to prevent another disaster like that coming. I mean, his promises to reform Wall Street, I think of him, I think of FDR, and I think of what he's doing, and there's just simply no comparison.
Right. No comparison and no reform. And when we talk about these esoteric things like a double-dip recession, there is not a double-dip recession. We've been in that. If they want to declare it over in 2009, let them. There are millions of people who are just not aware of this. Let me just, if I can, just one quick thing, because I jotted this down. It's the lead story in today's LA Times. And the lead itself says, Obama's job creation panel includes job-cutting executives. Not only job cutting, but attacking unions and so on. So, okay, two quick examples. One is GE. And
Jeff Immelt.
And Jeff Immelt. Okay, here is Jeff Immelt, CEO of GE, General Electric. and Obama appoints him the head of the Presidential Commission on Jobs. Okay, a week or two before that, there was a story in the New York Times that General Electric was the most massive tax evader in U.S. history. 2 weeks later, the CEO of GE is appointed to head this critical kind of thing. It's crazy. Then you look at the council. Okay, this surprised me. I didn't know what was going on. The council has 27 members. 23 of the 27 are CEOs of the leading corporations. 2 come from labor, 1 biologist, 1 economist. Okay, then there's Boeing. The head of Boeing is on the commission. Boeing presently is in front of the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, because what it has done is take a union shop in Washington State and close it and move the entire facility to a non-union factory in South Carolina.
Oh, right to work.
Yeah, right.
Norm, the conclusion is the Republicans should support Obama.
Of course.
I mean, there's no other conclusion you can have.
Of course.
Well, what are the business community whining for? That's what I can't believe. I
mean,
they think they'd actually get more if they were
able to more
leave him there.
The more they want, and the more they're frightened that they can't keep. Still more coming. Greed isn't even the word anymore. Gluttony, I think, is better than greed.
The way in which I hold Obama accountable for being duplicitous, not just that he didn't articulate these things, but I remember the speech in the campaign trail that said that we need somebody who really stands with unions, stands with labor, that if there were a case where there was a strike, he would, put on his comfortable shoes and show up and walk the picket line with them. Well, there were 115,000 people in the square at the Capitol in Wisconsin, more than were in Tahrir Square in Cairo, and President Obama was nowhere to be seen. And I just think that that's astounding to me. I mean, that seemed to me to be a gimme where he would have at least shown up to pay some sort of lip service.
But this whole thing, I wasn't present at the Labor Day address of Obama in Detroit, but I understand that the head of the AFL-CIO really greeted him. What I'm speaking about now is that much of organized labor really is laboring under a kind of false consciousness, because the only 2 unions I'm aware of who are participating in Occupy Wall Street are UFT, the teachers union, which
AFT?
No, not the AFT. But
I thought they were.
No, they're not. It's the United Federation of Teachers, which is always the left-wing splinter. And then UE, United Electrical Workers, who are always the splinter in the left of that whole thing. So the only people really opposing him thus far, it's not the larger labor movement. Okay.
Norm, one of the things that I'm constantly criticized for, and I'm sure you are as well, is that by focusing on Obama's sins, somehow we are being held accountable for potentially electing a Tea Party president. That somehow the moment that we critique Obama, we're going to end up with Rick Perry, and how would you like that?
Okay. Now, what I should be saying is, thank you, Bonnie. We rehearsed this, and that's exactly right. But I do have a couple of things I want to say very quickly, and I would like so many people who believe this way just to consider this. I was fortunate at one time to know a German radical who fled Hitler, was interned in a Spanish concentration camp, interceded by Paul Tillich, the theologian, got to this country, and he told me, he was someone I deeply respect, he told me that when you're compelled to choose between the lesser of 2 evils, that is not a moral choice. And what this means to me, it means a great many things, but if I were, how to say this, but if I were some kind of superannuated Leninist, which I'm not, but if I were, what this means is, first of all, there are enough continuities between this administration and the Bush administration that I'm not that concerned about all these differences. But of course, the Republicans, I don't even want to say in the air what I think of most of the Tea Party and Republican Party on this. But should they win, And should they win because Obama has not come out fighting, or because the Democrats have not replaced him with Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders or maybe Russ Feingold or some real Democrat, then maybe with the Republicans in, the people will finally wise up and really come out on the street. And that is a horrible thing because there's going to be a lot of suffering. That's why I don't take it lightly, or I don't want to be a Leninist or a Trotskyite or anything else. But the damage is already done. That damage is going to be compounded manyfold by Republicans. And when I say damage, I mean kids are going to suffer in their education, in their school lunch programs. People are going to be thrown out of their homes in still greater numbers. There's going to be still more unemployment, and all of the things. Healthcare is going to be. And that, of course, when you come to Bonnie's first question about what was I sort of getting my antenna up on at the beginning, it really was healthcare. And it was healthcare because of the way he abandoned the public option. We weren't even asking for a single payer. Of course we were, but not to stand up for that. So let me just say one thing on this. In a very crazy way, and I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist at all, but in a very crazy way, I hold Obama responsible for the Tea Party. And I hold Obama responsible because there was a leadership vacuum created. You've got people who are sort of proto-fascistic in many ways, and they smell weakness, and they can just move in, and they did. And as Bonnie pointed out before we went on the air, Obama had control of both houses. He could have been strong. He could have fought for every single measure that he had promised in the campaign, and there would not have been a Tea Party.
You're listening to WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We're talking with Norman Pollock. And Norm, I would agree with you on that. In fact, what really worried me was that you start with single payer, and if you're lucky, you end up with the public option. What instead we had happen was that the president closeted himself with Big Pharma, with the hospitals, with all of the medical groups, and cut a deal before he ever came out, and everything was off the table, including the public option.
Yeah.
It really is a disaster to think that a family might be forced to, individuals might be forced to pay as much as $6,000 a year for their own health care out of their own pocket rather than to have a public system. Some of the aspects of the law as it gets implemented, I think, are going to be shocking to people. At the same time, it does absolutely nothing to constrain the costs in a runaway medical system.
Bonnie, and Bill, if anybody has any doubts about any of this, one of the most eloquent and yet sad and pathetic things is, I'm not sure what it's called, but the kind of free medicine and free dental, when doctors have volunteered in places and people have stood in line all night just to get
the free hospital movement. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's where we are now, and we're supposed to be this and
wealthiest
country, industrial country in the world, et cetera, and we really are suffering, and I don't know what to say in terms of.
I come at this. I get as much criticism as you do for being supposedly, undermining the president and therefore giving aid and comfort to the Republican enemy. But the reality is that I came out of that sort of Ralph Nader tradition, which said that basically we have one corporate party with a hard right wing and a vaguely leftish wing. It isn't very left. And we keep getting pulled further and further to the right. The only place where I might differ with your analysis is that I watched this country elect Richard Nixon, and I watched this country elect Ronald Reagan back in the days when they called him Ronnie Reagan, and they didn't seem to learn their lesson. I was thinking about the great Who song the other day that said, "We won't get fooled again." My attitude is, oh yes, we will. Every 20 years we forget.
Sooner than we think.
Sooner than we think.
Yeah, I think so.
So what would you like to see happen?
What I would like in just simple terms, several things. At first I was a little skeptical about the Occupation Wall Street movement because on one hand, a lot of people are in agreement who are sympathetic that it is good that it is not, that the movement isn't coming out with just finite demands and closed
decision
leadership structure and decision making and all of that and so on. And that certainly has the strength of conviction. It has a strength of spontaneity. It has so much going for it, and especially if somehow it can persist, it can last, and so on. The one thing that I fear about that, and it's not about indicating this demand or that demand and so on. The one thing I fear is that the Obama administration can possibly co-opt it, and what I'm saying then is that ideally, even without declaring for a particular set of demands and so on, if the movement could make clear that it is beyond the two major parties,
I agree,
and that it can hold its own core, its own integrity. And what I would like to see on a lesser level is real challenges to Obama. I know he controls the machinery. I know the convention is a foregone conclusion and things like that. But real challenges in the primaries, but not pitting those who are, from my standpoint, good. Again, Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Russ Feingold, not pitting them against each other, but let them all take on different primaries where each might have the chance of scoring something. And then, since that will be a failure, but will get a momentum going, I really think it is time for a third party, even knowing it will result in the election of Republicans. Because the Democrats at this point are so tarnished, so completely committed to the wars, so completely committed to just about everything, have closed ranks around Obama on all kinds of economic policy. I think that the Democrats have, in effect, almost invalidated their own existence.
Having run as a third party candidate with the Green Party, if you thought it was bad back in 2000 in terms of the rules being slanted against you, it seems to me that the two-party rule has really solidified its hold on the process even more so, especially since Citizens United, because what you'd simply see is so much corporate money flow into the two existing parties. Ralph Nader is now arguing that the progressive left needs to take over the Democratic Party in the way that the Tea Party has taken over the GOP. And that if you really, that may be the only model that works. The challenge is who ends up being the leader.
Right. I guess I'm one of those silly guys who wants to go down with the colors flying. As Bonnie was talking, I was thinking back at 15. When I was 15 years old, I was working like mad for Henry Wallace and the Progressive Party. And I almost wrote Wallace's biography. We had some sessions together at his house.
Wonderful.
And I mean, this is, of course, years later when this came about. But there really has to be, no matter how much the cards are stacked against a third party, and Bonnie is right, they are so stacked in so many ways, subtle and overt. I know that people will feel that it's an ego trip or that it's this or that. It isn't. It's a necessary way of returning to sanity.
Well, Norm, I own newworkersparty.com anytime you're ready. Norman, I would love to get you back, and I would hope the times weren't so almost critical, that we could concentrate on some of your remembrances over
yeah, I'd like to talk to you about the 60.
I watched Bill's eyes get wide periodically as you had mentioned.
I interviewed a number of MSU students at the time that were down there, probably with you at the time, so I'd like to get back and talk about that.
Thank you so much for joining us. This has been very illuminating.
May we just sit here and listen to these guys?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Come on in and join us. We're going to be joined by Kevin Piedrick and David Mitchell from the North Star Center.
Hi.
The North Star Center is that wonderful place there on Lathrop Street that houses all sorts of interesting and intriguing organizations, and you become sort of the focus for the organizing for the Occupy Lansing that's coming about this weekend, starting at Saturday, 10 a.m. I guess some people are already down there. Is that right? Already down at the Capitol?
That's true. Some folks have already begun the occupation, but the bulk of it will be launching at 10 a.m. on Saturday the 15th.
And so this is a leaderless organization, so I don't want to call you the leaders of the local group, but you've been instrumental in helping get this organized so that people know where to go, when to go. What are the plans? How does this work? What is a General Assembly? What will people learn when they show up?
Well, when people show up, there's going to be first a rally at the Capitol. That's going to be starting at 10 a.m. this Saturday at the Capitol. But then we're going to have a General Assembly, which is essentially all the protesters and potential occupiers when they get there will be able to meet and have a very direct, participatory, democratic meeting where they can make decisions. So, for example, what North Star Center has done so far hasn't been to make any decisions whatsoever about the movement. It's been to foster a debate about what we should expect, what we should hope for with this movement, what we think it should be. But what's going to be decided about the movement, what we are going to have, who we're going to have as speakers, what we're going to support, not support, what we're going to do, where we're going to be, all that's going to be decided in a purely democratic way at the General Assembly of all the protesters and occupiers who are there.
Now, there's a kind of process, isn't there, that sort of surprises people, where a speaker will talk and the words are repeated to ensure that everybody is engaged in the conversation. That may be new to some people.
Oh, yeah, it's called the People's Mic, and it's used when amplified sound is not allowed. We're hoping to be using amplified sound.
Oh, okay.
But basically the way that would work is I would say something, and then everyone within earshot who heard it would repeat it. And it kind of flows in waves, and that it would be great if there's enough people for that to be used. I know it's big in New York City where there's thousands and thousands of people. Just a quick thing on the on Occupy Lansing. One thing we're excited about is though we've been around both as a worker center and North Star for several years, we had no part in getting it going or getting the Facebook group going or really building up the numbers. And so a number of the folks who were involved in that were at the meeting on Wednesday, and we'll be following up this coming Wednesday. And what's exciting about that is there were 50 people in the room, and we knew, besides 4 worker center folks, we knew 1 person.
Is that right?
So that, to me, is what's very exciting. This is, while we're bringing what we can to the table in terms of organization and a space and resources, this really is already much bigger than us.
Wednesday Thompson, I know, of U.S. Uncut, she was part of that movement at Bank of America, doing some protests there, so that we have some overlap between the U.S. Uncut movement and other movements that have been instrumental. I'm a longtime subscriber to Adbusters, the Canadian magazine, and that's how I first saw this. The summer issue came in. It's a quarterly sort of anarchist kind of magazine, anti-corporate magazine, and it just had a one-page ad that said, "Come to Occupy Wall Street in New York City on September 15th and bring a sleeping bag." And I thought that's all it took. The spark was there, wasn't it? I mean, it's as if people were waiting for somebody to just say, let's go ahead and do this.
Yeah, absolutely. At our first pre-occupation meeting this past Wednesday at North Star Center, we had dozens of people there who were introducing themselves and saying things like, I haven't taken part in something like this before, but for a long time I thought there was something wrong with this country and the way everything's run. And I've been thinking, I've seen the Occupy Wall Street, I've seen occupation spread, and I've been thinking this is the moment that I need to get out into the streets and do something.
And where will the General Assembly be held? Will it be at Rivers Park?
The General Assembly, as it is right now, will be at the Capitol.
At the Capitol. Okay.
It's not clear where we will be staying, whether it will be Rutgers Park or the Capitol. It's open, and it's going to be up for the General Assembly to decide.
Where's Rutgers Park?
Rutgers Park is 2 blocks, a block and a half south of the Capitol, right in front of the city library. So it's Capitol and I think
Kalamazoo?
Kalamazoo, yes.
Okay. And so anybody is free to come and join and bring a sleeping bag, come for the day, come for the night, whatever?
Please, yes, come.
I think people should be free to come and participate however they're able. Some folks will be there for the day. We know some people are not planning on leaving and are already expecting that. The main point is bringing folks out, and just a quick point about the Occupy Wall Street. They had no idea that they were going to be touching this off across the country. I really don't think it was part of their plans, but it has the sentiment of the corporations have gone too far, the banks and the financial sector have gone too far, and they control the politicians. That really has struck a nerve across the country. Currently, there's an 850 Occupy fill in the blank for the city across the country, and that was not what they were anticipating with Occupy Wall Street. And I don't know exactly what it means, but I think that there's something bigger going on that we're very excited about.
One of the places that I keep track of that really has moved me is going to the Tumblr site that is the 99%, because the argument is we're the 99% and the 1%. You know, the 1% of this population controls 40% of the wealth and 20% of the annual income. That's just staggering. If we had those resources to use for the social good, we'd be a lot healthier society right now. And there are these sad stories from people where they just handwrite a note, put it in front of their face. They show part of their face on Tumblr, and you read their story after story of people who've lost their jobs, students who graduated can't get a toehold in the society. It's a staggering change in this culture. We've gone from being an optimistic people to being just devastated at what's happening. And I'm not even sure that the Wall Street meltdown is all of it. I mean, it seems to be there's structural changes occurring across the world that really make you wonder. What do you do? You are of that age, just getting your careers launched, just trying to find a toehold in the culture.
Well, what do I do about all that?
Yeah, what do you do about all that?
Well, this is a start, for
Yeah.
sure. Occupy Lansing, Occupy Wall Street, Occupy everywhere is a good start on this. That's kind of the thing that I love most about this, is that the people who are going to be there are going to make the decisions about what this is.
Okay.
So people all the time ask about, well, what are their demands? We don't understand what this Occupy anything is. Well, they're going to make their own decisions on what they want the movement to be itself. But more than anything, at least from where I can see it, this whole occupation movement is one not so much to make any sort of menu of legislative demands to people who they don't even think are listening to them, but really to build institution in the culture of this country, an actual social economic movement.
Cultural too.
And cultural too. To really unify people who have all been thinking the same thing, that this 1% is out of control and is really dominating this whole society.
Bonnie,
Yeah.
one of the people that we've had on the show quite a few times is Ray Holman. Ray Holman is with UAW 6,000. He represents state employees, but he's in Wall Street right now. Are you going to have anybody coming back from Wall Street that can talk about that experience? Because I think that'd be interesting to fire people out.
There are already folks who were part of the initial steps in New York City that are hoping to speak on the 15th. I'm glad you brought up labor, because it's important to note on this. I don't know if it's been reported elsewhere, but the Lansing Labor Council actually endorsed Occupy Lansing and will have a beverage tent out there giving out free water. So I think that's something to pay attention to, and it relates well to the Tumblr pictures, because a lot of it is adults, or what we would, when we talk about this Occupy, sure, it's being painted as purely young people, and that's one reason I think it's very interesting. It's young people saying, I don't have options, but then it's people who are saying, I dotted all the I's, I've been doing this, and it's still not working. And I just want to bring that up as something very different going on. There are young people involved and excited, but it is not a young person's movement. The meeting Wednesday, the average age was pushing 40. In terms of the room,
which sounds so old.
Well, I would just say, a bunch from 18-year-olds to 60. This woman introduced herself. She said she's a grandmother and she's 73. So that's the age range we're talking about, and I think that's exciting too. I also think that is a marked difference from something like the Tea Party, which is for the most part a specific demographic.
Yeah.
And those Tumblr pictures of people saying, I did the right thing and here's the things I've lost, are pointing to people weren't attracted to the small demographic of the Tea Party. They're attracted to the left populism of this growing and brand new Occupy movement.
Just a block away from the house, there's 5 middle-aged people who've lost their house, foreclosed homes. I mean, this hits everyone, and that's what I think that you're trying to put together.
I live in the country, and on a 1-mile stretch of road on the way to my house, there are 4 houses that are gone, just abandoned. I don't know in what state they are, whether they've been foreclosed upon or what the situation is. We're seeing this kind of expanding blight. But one of the things that some of the older heads, I was talking with a woman today who had been part of the 60s organizing, and she said, I just kind of worry that the movement needs to be careful that people who have an agenda don't jump in front of this parade and pretend they're leading it. And I think that's part of the danger, isn't it? I mean, we've seen Politicians will find you very attractive as a demographic, and pretty soon they're going to be saying, won't you help us distribute our literature and all of this kind of thing. How do you avoid being co-opted by the people who already got us in this mess?
We were just talking about this
Were you
right
really?
before you had us on. This is one of our big worries about it. But we're already thinking ahead on how to deal with that kind of instance. Of course, there's always going to be some group or some politician or somebody who's going to want to try and get in the head and act like they're the leader of something that they didn't start. But the thing is that no one person started this. No one person or one group or anything has had this develop. The key about all these occupations has been that the people who are there are democratically deciding who they are, what their movement is, and where it's going. And I know our commitment is to keep it that way. I think everyone else there, everyone we've seen at the meeting we've already had, has been very committed to that. And so we're hoping that this can be a more organic, democratic process and development of the movement.
Because we've been worried about that. This meeting this past Wednesday really calmed me down. Not that it's figured out, but calmed me down around that question. Partly because so many folks there were, there was hardly any mention of Obama. There was hardly any mention of electoral politics, left or right. There was a sense that they respond to corporate America before they respond to anyone else, so we're going to focus on corporate America. It was almost as if they weren't even relevant, and it surprised me to such a degree, because you usually always have folks come in and they're there because they agree with you, but also because they have so and so that they want to get elected or move forward. And we saw almost none of that, which I was actually very surprised and emboldened by. I felt like the responsibility of handling the special interests coming in and claiming leadership or ownership of this is going to be addressed by people. And so far, I've been excited about what that looks like.
See, what happened, Bonnie and I followed the Tea Party from the very beginning, and my observation is what happened to them. They became part of the political process. They're as bad as everything they were decrying.
It started out as a grassroots movement, but it didn't take long to get co-opted,
No,
and that's
something that's real important.
But you could see why the corporate donors would be happy to co-opt them. I mean, there were people like Dick Armey with Freedom Works that were very eager to use that as a recruiting tool. I don't think you're going to attract a corporate crowd. In fact, I think the Democrats are going to be a bit surprised that maybe you're not just progressives trying to say, let's reelect Obama. They are really hoping you're going to re-energize that group, but that may not, that may not be what the end result is. Yeah. I wouldn't expect those big corporate donations if I were you.
Yeah, I don't think we're counting.
I think you're lucky to get water in a porta potty, hopefully.
They debated about orange juice but couldn't kick it in anymore, not after they're taking away all their dues here in Michigan. Tell me a little bit about the North Star Center and the work that you do there, just so that we know that there's a broader part of this whole package.
Sure. So the Occupy Lansing didn't start with us. We're just throwing in our what we have to offer to it. But the North Star Center has been around 5 years, and it's an organizing space. The official line is it's a radical event space and venue committed to social justice and building a culture of resistance. What that means is we're having speakers, we're hosting cultural events, we're doing English as a second language classes, and we're supporting local grassroots organizing from the bottom up. The best example of that right now is an entire different entity of folks called the Lansing Workers Center, which has been around for 2 years, which Kevin can tell you a little bit about, as that's how he's come to be involved there.
Okay.
Right. The Lansing Workers Center is an organization of social justice activists and labor activists who will go to any place at all in Lansing where there is trouble and injustice at work, and will help you organize, will help you deal with your boss, will help you do anything really you need when you're, getting kind of screwed over at work. And, there's a lot of problems that need to be addressed. And there's, I think you guys are probably both familiar with the fact that there's just kind of a deficiency of, the actual activist organizations, labor organizations who can deal with the massive amount of problems there are. So we're a group of people who are committed to going anywhere and helping anyone we can when it comes to workplace issues and labor issues.
Bonnie, one of the things, I know we didn't plan this, because we're a lot like you guys. We don't plan a lot. But
think of us as a leaderless radio.
Yes, right. But I think it's an interesting relationship we created tonight with Norm, and one end of that spectrum, going back into the early 60s. There's not many people that can say around that shook hands with W.E. Du Bois, but in this group right here, we're at both ends of that
spectrum. We are at both ends of the spectrum.
Which is incredible.
It is.
I that kind of makes me really feel good.
I wrote a sort of scathing piece a long time ago when the Tea Party first got started. I called it a field guide to Tea Party crazies, and then listed the various groups that were components of that. And what bothered me, I guess, about the Tea Party was that I really admired their energy and their frustration at what had happened to the economy. My problem was with their analysis. Their analysis was that somehow if we rid ourselves of this burdensome federal government, that all will be well. And in reality, they don't take a look at the corporate problems. They don't take a look at all of the other structural problems we're dealing with. How do we, with this kind of General Assembly approach, or do we come up with local solutions? Are we looking at national solutions? Are we looking at issues that at the local level that we should be dealing with? Is that how this will proceed?
Well, I think all of the above.
All the above.
All
Okay.
the above. Yeah, there are issues to do with stuff going on in Lansing that I think everyone in Lansing and people at the occupation are going to be concerned with. That stuff going on in Michigan with whether it's the emergency managers or a number of other issues nationally and internationally. This occupation is connected with occupations all across the world, whether it's from Egypt and Cairo or in Europe and Spain, in a whole number of places all over the world. There are people occupying.
Can we get Sausage, the riot dog from Greece, over here? I really like dogs. I miss my little dog, Ollie. I'd give anything to be able to pet Sausage once in my life. So maybe I can bring my dog and we can have a riot dog out there. Okay.
Be a mascot.
Yeah.
I bet it would be tough to get that dog in this country.
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit. Yeah.
He didn't get a visa.
So what's the agenda like for Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, I would say part of just quickly going back to what he said, why it has different capacity than the Tea Party is, well, there are thousands of Tea Party organizations. They all could say some things, but they were kept to really a pretty tight leash on a lot of what they could talk about.
Yeah.
And this whether it's a General Assembly or this larger Occupy conversation is open, and it's open in the sense of we need to be talking about a range of things that Tea Party is never going to talk about, whether that's institutionalized racism or economic inequality in terms of access to resources. And so those things being there from the beginning, I think it gives it room to actually be a conversation versus the Tea Party being narrowed down and really having to fight against their own initiatives that they were involved with when they were wearing other hats. So a lot of them are anti-immigrant folks. That limited their ability to appeal to anyone besides in my opinion, middle class America, or middle to upper class business America. And so the General Assembly, the aim is to reach a broader range of folks. Even taking something as simple as the term occupy. That's how it's caught on. Not everyone's excited about that, right? We have occupied Palestine, occupied Iraq. We're on indigenous land. Those kinds of that. So people have an issue with the word occupy. The difference of being able to have a conversation about that versus saying you're taking us off topic. I think that's an important difference.
So you have the ability to be self-critical.
I hope so. I hope we do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I noticed in the interviews with some of the people at the Wall Street protests, some of them were former Tea Party people who felt that movement had been hijacked and that they were interested in joining this movement because their concern was the problems with what had happened with the meltdown and the consequences thereof. Now, the meeting on Wednesday evening, where will that be and what time?
106 Lathrop. It's at 7:30, and it's just off Michigan Avenue behind the Jerusalem Bakery.
And who should come to that?
Anyone who's interested in the Occupy Wall Street and Occupy Lansing movement, interested in the General Assembly, and especially interested in social and economic justice for human beings.
One of the things I'm very interested in is I know a lot of people think the solution is an immediate return to massive levels of growth. But given the problems of climate change and given the depletion of resources and the exploding population on the planet, I'm not sure that's a healthy model. I'm hoping that this is a conversation that leads at the local level to what kind of society do we want to live in, and how can we take care of each other, and what is the model that can keep us having a healthy community there where people take care of each other. So I'm hoping this is the beginning of that conversation.
Yeah, I think I speak for both of us when I say we're, dreaming of that being the conversation.
Right.
We've been waiting for that for a long time. I think one of the beauties of Occupy Wall Street, and especially comparison to other movements, the Tea Party included in that, is that Occupy Wall Street movement, occupation movements that have been going on this month, they're asking one of the fundamental questions of who really runs this society.
Yep.
It's not just a specific slate of policies. It's about who controls our society. Is it going to be the people? Is it going to be the corporations? Is it going to be the 1%? And that conversation starting along with a whole vast array of other conversations like the one you brought up and a bunch of other ones. And I think it's going to be really healthy for the country and for the world.
I'm hopeful that people, if they're interested in getting more information, can go to LansingOnlineNews.com. We'll try to keep people updated on what's happening there. We put up some information today, and we'll be putting up some video. And if we can get our hands on a little Wi-Fi there, we might even do another live webcast from the site on Saturday. I'm hoping that might happen. Or I'll borrow somebody's 3G card if we can do that. Do some live webcasting from the site. And next Monday, ideally, we hope to be joined by people who've been down there at Occupy Wall Street as well. And we'd love to have a wrap-up from you after the event. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good question.
Cool.
Yeah.
My brain.
Well, you need to know
brain boiled
Norm.
up.
Yeah.
You guys are terrific. Listen, on this business of Occupy, it didn't occur to me what you were saying about how obviously the connotation would be our own form of event. But if we wanted to take that and turn